The History of Lenoir High School, Part 5. The Graduating Class, 1934, Lenoir High School. From the Mountaineer, May 28, 1934. Top row, left to right, Joe Rabb, Bill Warren, Jerome Beard, Joe Powell, George Petrie, Bob Hedrick, Richard Maddox, Ira Jones, Ken Underdown. Second row, Ralph Bolden, Bruce Johnson, Rex Beach, Carson Coffey, Jack Gibbons, Ray Hayes, Max Hayes, and Vic Pipes. Third row, Catherine Rabb, Florence Parks, Charlotte Peeler, Betty Story. Six Ballou, Bert Isbell, Margaret Bradford. Fourth row, Mary Douglas McCulley, Neely Foster, Nell Curley, Rena Rustin, Myrtle Cottrell, June Kirby, Helen Huntley, Sally Martin, Helen Ludwig, Margaret Chester, Eileen Barlow, Myrtle Bowley. Fifth row, Marjorie Hoskins, Laura Emily Pitts, Faye Cresson, Virginia Martin, Margaret, and that's missing, and there are several names missing, and I pick up the next name at Monty Clure, Louise Presswood, Lila Holshouser, Inez Hoover, and mascots were Lucy Ford and Buddy Haymaker. Class of 1934. Retha Jane Ainsley, Reva Gay Austin, Mary Frances Ballou, Myra Oline Barlow, Rex Beach, Jerome Frederick Beard, Sarah Ethel Black, Ralph Augustus Bolden, Myrtle Gilmore Bolick, 1985, Margaret Sturgis Bradford, Margaret May Chester, Monty Louise Clure, Carson Reeves Coffey, Myrtle Mapleton Cottrell, Era Faye Cresson, Nell C. Curley, Margaret Elizabeth Dula, 1986, Neely Louise Foster, John J. Gibbons Jr., Walter Ray Hayes, Max Harold Hayes, Robert Wilburn Hedrick Jr., 1982, Inez Bingham Hoover, Joyce Vera Hoffman, Lila Blanche Holshouser, Marjorie Louise Hoskins, Helen Florence Huntley, Elizabeth Louise Isbell, Ira Snow Jones, Bruce B. Johnson, Catherine Caroline Jonas, June Marie Kirby, Margaret Elizabeth Lackey, Helen Louise Ludwig, Sally Martin, 1989, Virginia Irene Martin, 1988, Richard Donnelly Maddox, Mary Douglas McCulley, 1991, Florence Vivian Parks, Joseph Harold Powell, Charlotte Camilla Peeler, George William Petrie, Victor Delmar Pipes, Laura Emily Pitts, Catherine Louise Presswood, Joseph Carroll Rabb, Kathleen Ramsey Rabb, Katie Pauline Smith, Betty Story, Victor Kenneth Underdown, William Rogers Warren, Ronald Earl Watson. Lenoir High School graduates of 1935. LHS classmates attended the 40th reunion held the first weekend in August at Cedar Rock Country Club. An informal picnic on the porch was held the night prior to the buffet dinner, August 9th, in the main dining room of the club. 33 of the 62 class members attended. Miss Alice Robbins, favorite teacher of the class, attended, as did James Harper Jr., mascot for the class. Glenn Palmer, class president, was master of ceremonies. Flowers for the occasion were grown and arranged by Mrs. Jenny Marshall, Mary Dysart, and Mrs. E.M. Manchester. Shown from left, front row, Virginia Drum Noel, Miss Robbins, Margaret Beach Burks, Edith McLean Barden, Frances Raines Webb, Marjorie Stemple Underdown, Doris Payne Dalton, Marion Stone Bonham, Laura Elizabeth Bumgardner Yount, Christine Ainsley Loops, Marjorie Hall Forbes, Helen Powell Bradford, Virginia Strother Kirsten, Olivia Strother Keys. Second row, Jack Spainhour, Richard E. Hardaway, L.G. Davis, Mary Maynard, Vivian Huntley Mull, Frances Hoskins Woodbury, Tina Bernard Atwood, Betty Miller Purdom, Burton Johnson. Third row, James Harper Jr., Rule Query, George Childers, Thomas Parks, Glenn Palmer, Leonard Hufstatler, Irwin Johnson, Albert Carpenter, Harper Bell, Margaret Harris Strickland, Agnes Walker Shuford, and Etta Mae Bates Jackson. Doula photo, and this was from Lenoir News Topic 1975. Class of 1935. Ella Christine Ainsley, Margaret McNary Beach, Mildred Louise Bean, Etta Mae Bates, Floy Elizabeth Benfield, Elmira Justine Bernard, Laura Elizabeth Bumgardner, Vetra Mae Clark, Minnie Irene Davis, Ruby Virginia Drum, Margaret Madeline Ferries, Willie Lee Greer, Grace Helene Hass, Marjorie Lucille Hall, Margaret Elizabeth Harris, Frances Owen Hoskins, Vivian Rush Huntley, Ora Lee Kincaid, Theda Hope Lighton, Antoinette Gregory Makeley, Marjorie Keith May, Mary Elizabeth Maynard, Lonnie Kimber McCreary, Edith Louise McLean, Mary Elizabeth McIntosh, Betty Miller, Doris Helen Payne, Zeta Lorraine Pope, Helen Powell, Pauline Powell, Frances Irene Raines, Helen Sturgis Smith, Marjorie Claire Stemple, Marion Estella Stone, Olivia G. Strother, Virginia Vaughn Strother, Pearl Celeste Triplett, Agnes Carolyn Walker, Helen Mull Winkler, Paul Edward Ainsley, James Harper Bell Jr., Perry Albert Carpenter Jr., George Childers, L.G. Davis, Andrew Hamby, Richard Eggleston Hardaway, Leonard Gray Hufstatler, Burton Johnson, Edwin Roderick Johnson, Thomas Isbell McGill Jr., Jacob Harshaw Martin, Robert Glenn Palmer, Thomas Franklin Parks, Robert Rule Query, Charles Ellis Rhodes, Clyde Hughes Sanders, Jack Spainhour, William Paul Stallings, Samuel Clary Stimson. LHS Class Reunion. Members of the Lenoir High School class of 1936 met at Cedar Rock Country Club August 14th for a dinner reunion party. Shown from left, first row are Patty Pearson Leffler, Mildred Bates Morgan, Cleo Hampton Justice, Frances Safford Mason, Jewel Barlow Pipes, Miss Alice Robbins, James Harper, Ruth Johnson Setzer. Second row, Don Winkler, James Price, Sturgis May, Alice Levins Beach, Bobby Rabb, Ruth Crisp Zinerink, Laura Cook Robbins, Nancy White Lebturner, Mary Hefner Girk, Richard Jones, Laura Pulliam Doula, and Marjorie Crisp Rankin. Mrs. George Laura Robbins entertained the group at her home the night prior to the dinner, and this was a doula photo. December 4th, 1924, Lenoir News Topic. Price, 5 cents a copy. Highly distinguished Robert Powell, Judy Church, James Farthing. Honor Roll: Francis Hamby, Mildred Kirkman, Viola Smith, Evelyn Powell, Frank Moore, Hal Marley. 6th grade. Gordon Lutz, Billy Maynard, George Robbins. 7th grade. Josephine Courtney, Adley Hicks. Distinguished Honor Roll: Burton Johnson, Margaret Beach, Edith McLean, Lucille West, Coralie Cook, Faye Wesson, Joyce Hoffman, Pauline Smith, Wade McGee, Jack Phillips, Edith Miller, Fanny Presswood, Marina Chester, Bertha Prestwood, Robert Powell, Eugene Sipes, Margaret Rabb, Annie Bowers Beach, Danny Foster, Otis Strother. 3rd grade. Ralph Barnett, John Jennings, Colin Price, Billy Wynn, Marjorie Harris, Ruth McCall, Ruth McDade, Lois Shell, Nancy Thompson, Reba Wilson, Dixon Whistnut, Margaret Greer, Mary Stewart Powell, Fred Hall McLean, Jack Maynard, Richard Maddox, Carl Triplett, Lawrence Clark, Louise Gilbert, Gail Phillips, Colleen Richards, Clarence Holden, Victor Pipes, Carol Setzer, Preston Sipes. 4th grade. Colleen Lackey, Lily Robbins, Lucille Winkler, Virgie Waters, Thomas Rabb, Ray Kirby, Lee Powell, Ernest Mullis, Dorothy Courtney, Grace Cresson, Mildred Melton, Louise Minish, Lois Nelson, Virginia Winkler. 5th grade. Christine Herman, Ralph Hanby. Honor Roll of Lenoir Public School for November. The following are the Roll of Honor students at the Lenoir Graded School for the past month. 1st grade. Andrew Hanby, Jack Spainhour, Elizabeth Bumgardner, Margaret Harless, Billy Bryan Arthur, Doris Payne, Frances Raines, Helen Winker, Amy Walker, Ellen Walker, Mary Maynard, Sue Ross Welch, Agnes Walker, and Nora Holder. Mary Lou Chester, Faye Beeman, Lonnie Calloway, Margaret McCall. 2nd grade. Victor Bryant, Clyde Duncan, Eugene Keller, Donald Winkler, Grace Crisp, Mildred McCall, Esley Presswood, Annie Laurie Teague, Lucille White. Class of 1936. Margaret Ruth Austin, Faye Elizabeth Ainsley, Una Ainsley, Jewel Jeanette Barlow, Mildred Louise Bates, Margaret Lantine Braswell, Mildred Dolores Coffey, Margaret Susan Cook, Laura Christine Cook, Marjorie Louise Crisp, 1983, Ruth Estes Crisp, Mary Bell Dixon, Joyce Sudrath Hall, 1987, Anna Cleo Hampton, Ruth Eugenia Hyatt, Ruth Virginia Hoffman, Helen Elizabeth Hoffman, Lucille Hass, Mary Miller Hefner, Doris Ruth Johnson, Patty Brown Pearson, Laura Pulliam, Lila Cavell Rash, Frances Luella Safford, Mary Etta Sharp, Elizabeth Irene Winkler, Nancy Henry White, Sarah Rose Young, Ralph Milton Bradshaw, Henry Bryson Burgess, C. Edward Davis, Jr., Stanford Eugene Harris, William Adrian Jenkins, Richard Mitchell Jones, Fred Vaughn Keyes, Sturgis May, Wallace Clark Marley, Rex Wilson Pennell, James Price, Robert Lamar Rabb, Doyle Wilburn Robbins, Dallas Lester Robbins, Garland Wilson Swanson, 1972. Donald Leonard Winker, Edward Martin Watson. Lenoir News Topic, 1976. First reunion in 39 years. Lenoir High School class of 1937 met August 14th at the Lenoir Women's Club for a social hour followed by dinner catered by Mrs. Magdalene Nash. Music was furnished by Bubba Warren and tapes of the class's era. Class members came from California, Arizona, New Jersey, Louisiana, Washington, D.C., Georgia, and Tennessee. An open house was held August 13th at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Jim Todd. Pictured from left, first row, are Evelyn Jones Nelson, Erna McCrary Sumlin, Helen Price Penson, Elizabeth Cloninger Clark, Bessie Maud Stimson, who was also Mrs. T.J. Voss, Frances Stone Morris, Gwendolyn Robbins Clark, Gladys Knight Sawyer, Mary Lucille White Cranford. In second row, Mac Dula, Charles Cottle, Freddie Saunders Reynolds, Sarah Jean Hamby Greer, Mary Emma Cruz Church, Betty June Shell Palmer, Lucille Rector Coffey, Mary Hood Thompson, Sam Johnson, Doris Lindsay Steeb, T.M. Jack Robbins, and Mayalda Austin Powell. Jack Courtney Smith. Third row, Charlotte Bradshaw Ritz, Bobby Croker Spainhour, Nell Poteet Carpenter, Perkins Miller, Kenneth Barlow, Robert Gibbons, Hetty Childers Teague, Christine Goebel Havard, Harry Clay, James Todd, and Frank White. This was a doula photo. Lenoir High Reunion, class of 1937. A 50th class reunion of Lenoir High School was held recently at the Lenoir Women's Club. From the left, front to back, are Sam Johnson, Helen Price Penson, Gladys Knight Sawyer, Frances Stone Morris, Mary Lucille White Cranford, Mary Emma Cruz Church, Josephine Payne Hanna, Jewel Isbell Gregg, Mayalda Austin Powell, Reverend Jack C. Smith, Thomas Jack Robbins, Judge Harry C. Martin, Bobby Coker Spainhour, Erna McCrary Summerlin, Betty June Shell Palmer, Doris Lindsay Steeb, Ella Hendricks Coleman, Mabel Carlton Hunt, Frank B. White, James R. Todd, Jackson Carlson, Robert A. Gibbons, Hetty Childers Gibbs, Christine Goebel Havard, Dr. A. A. McLean. Not pictured was Freddie Saunders Reynolds. Class of 1937. Mayalda Wilson Austin, Charlotte Bush Bradshaw, 1986, Hazel Victoria Branch, Mildred Gwendolyn Branch, Barbara Jean Brown, Elizabeth Colleen Church, Barbara Good Courtney, Ruth Elizabeth Curley, Mabel Haupt Carlton, Hetty Mae Childers, Elizabeth Tuttle Cloninger, Mabel Marie Cottrell, Mary Emma Cruz, Barbara Dawn Croker, Mary Christine Goebel, Dorothy Ray Harless, Mary Catherine Hood, Sarah Jean Hamby, Buna Faye Hass, Sarah Ella Hendricks, Jewel Mae Isbell, Evelyn Faye Jones, Gladys Ann Knight, Chauncey Lee Kirby, Doris Catherine Lindsay, Katie Mae McMillan, Helen Nicholson Maynard, June Elizabeth Montgomery, Erna Mae McCrary, Reva Mae Nelson, Clara Josephine Payne, Elizabeth Presswood, Hope Yates Phillips, Nellie Imogene Poteet, Helen May Price, Anne Ellen Rash, Mary Gwendolyn Robbins, Lucille May Rector, Freddie Burke Saunders, June Elizabeth Shale, Frances Van Scoter Stone, Carolyn Hope Turner, Mary Martin Wisnut, Mary Lucille White, 1989, Ruby Wilson Winkler, Howard Nelson Baker, William Kenneth Barlow, Charles Hughes Caudle, J. Harry Clay, Jackson Landrum Carlson, Henry McKee Dula, 1984, Robert Alexander Gibbons, Sam Johnson, Harry Coatney Martin, William Randolph Murray, William Nathan May, Francis David McGill, Augustus Alexander McLean Jr., Doyle Justice Norris, Dietz Anderson Rudisill, Thomas Marshall Robbins, Cecil Irvin Sharp, Jack Courtney Smith, Willis E. Stemple, James Ralph Todd Jr., Harold Ivy Smith, Frank Boyd White Jr. Top photo is class of 1939. LHS class of 1939, the graduating class of 1939, the first class to graduate with 12 years, held its first reunion August 23rd at Cedar Rock Country Club. Attending were front row, from left, Hendron Doc Quarry, one of the favorite teachers, Miss Alice Robbins, Betty Triplett Petrie, Armetta Pipes Holden, Ramona Scott Campbell, Mildred Robbins Underdown. Second row, Jennings Coffey, Lloyd Robbins, James Todd, Bill Moore, Max Childers, John Downing, David Fry, S.L. Underdown, Clarence Sudrath. In the bottom photo is a class of 1938. Lenoir High School reunion. The graduating class of 1938 held its first class reunion on August 23rd at Cedar Rock Country Club. Attending were front row, Margaret Wagner Dean, Miss Alice Robbins, math teacher, Ruth Triplett Clark, Ethel Clark Triplett, Virginia Tuttle Laxton, Virginia Jones Schronk, Catherine Hoffman Walker, Irene Walsh Parsons. Second row, Reba Talbert Price, Margaret Andrews Grant, Jewel Hall Winkler, Ruth Richards Presswood, Dorothy McLean McCormick, DeWitt Pitts, Lynn Bernhardt, Fern Church. Third row, Clarence Petrie, Columbus Kincaid, Joe Price, Margie Bean, Lauren Happ, Sybil Walker Shaw, Robert Hill, Olivia Pipes Cook, Clara Green Argo, Mark Goforth Jr., and Cheryl Greer. Class of 1938. Note, 1938 was the last class to graduate under the 11-year course. 20 of the original class formed a 12-year class and graduated in 1939. Margaret Lucille Andrews, Dorothy Hoover Beach, Margie Louise Bean, Ruth Marie Benson, Lynn Richmond Bernhardt, William Benjamin Blades, Horace Edmund Bradshaw, Clarence Thomas Borneman, Walter Tressel Carpenter Jr., William Vern Church, Ethel May Clark, Jewel Gwendolyn Cottrell, Margaret Ivy Ford, George Mark Goforth Jr., Margaret Irene Gooden, Mary Elizabeth Gregg, Clary Ann Green, Dallas Cheryl Greer, Jewel Marie Hall, Ted Leon Hall, Carol Talmadge Harrison, Dorothy Ruth Hayes, Doris Ruby Herman, Robert Burkhead Hill, Dorothy Enid Hoskins, Mary Virginia Huntley, Anna Catherine Hoffman, Chauncey Irene Jackson, Virginia Gray Jones, Columbus Philip Kincaid, Boston McGee Lackey Jr., Sarah Henrietta Laxton, Lois Lee Lindsay, Dorothy Ann McLean, J. Wilson McLean, Mary Ethel McCreary, Clarence Wesley Petrie, Betty Olivia Pipes, Frederick DeWitt Pitts, Joe Carroll Price, Eugenia Frances Ragsdale, Margaret Ruth Richards, Ned Riggs, Violet Lucille Russell, Margaret Eunice Setzer, Edwin Cosby Sprouse, Reba Ray Talbert, Virginia Elizabeth Tuttle, Ruth Eloise Triplett, Margaret Virginia Wagner, Sybil Henry Walker, Alma Irene Walsh, and Margaret Louise Wood. Lenoir News Topic, Tuesday, August 16, 1988. Those attending the Lenoir High reunion are from left to right: Betty Triplett Petrie, Margaret Setzer Jones, Virginia Tuttle Laxton, Dorothy McLean McCormick, Ruth Triplett Clark, Reba Talbert Price, second row: Sybil Walker Shaw, Ruth Richards Presswood, Virginia Jones Schronk, Ruth Benson Willis, Margaret Bean Lauenhap, Jewel Hall Winkler, Catherine Hoffman Walker, Ramona Scott Campbell, Arminta Pipes Holden, Olivia Pipes Cook, and third row: Clarence Petrie, Jennings Coffey, S.L. Underdown, Mildred Robbins Underdown, Dorothy Hoskins Greer, William Moore, Boston Lackey, Harry Hatcher, Walter Carpenter, Fern Church, James Todd, Cheryl Greer, fourth row: Mark Goforth Jr., Lynn Bernhardt, Clarence Sudrath, Joe Price, Columbus Kincaid, Max Childers, and John Downing. Lenoir classes reunite. The Lenoir High School class of 1938-1939 held its 50th reunion at the Holiday Inn, August 5th through 6th. The 1938 class was the last one to graduate 11 years. 20 of the original class formed a 12th year class and graduated in 1939. Both classes were included with 36 members attending. A Friday evening Get Acquainted party was held in the club room at the Holiday Inn. On Saturday night, the class celebrated with a buffet dinner. Clarence Petrie, president, presided as master of ceremonies. Max Childers was recognized and recalled some of the fun times in the 1930s. Margie Bean Lauenhap gave a reading nylon and credit cards, which was enjoyed by the class. Class members reminisced about the high school days and the Lenoir High School band and the football players. The planning committee for the reunion was composed of Margaret Jones, Lynn Bernhardt, Cheryl Greer, Jewel Winkler, Columbus Kincaid, Clarence Petrie, Virginia Laxton, Ruth Clark, S.L. Underdown, and Mildred Underdown. Class of 1939. Note: the first class to graduate under the 12-year course: Max Childers, Craven Caudle, Jennings Coffey, John Downing, David Fry, Harry Hatcher, Carol Lampkin, Bill Moore, Doyle Norris, Hendren Query, Lloyd Robbins, Clarence Sudrath, Jimmy Todd, S.L. Underdown, R.E. Wilson, Jean McCorkle, Mary Pipes, Mildred Robbins, Ollie Roberts, Ramona Scott, and Betty Triplett. Lenoir News Topic, Friday, August 30th, 1974. Class reunion. Those attending are shown left to right: Front row, class mascot, Jim Haymaker, Sammy Presswood, Jim Pritchett, Mary Ruth Warren Mundy, Mabel Beach Rab, Ted Hardaway, Mary Lee Dysart Joyner, Mildred Barlow Smith, Ruth Cook Clark, Julia Carlisle Campbell, Aline Broyhill Stevens, Tekla Raines Kelly. Second row, Bill Stevens, Nancy Beauclure Shell, Liv Bernhardt Good, Chauncey Keller Puckett, Sybil Baker Sudrath, Jewel Davis McCrary, Marion Robbins Austin, Frances Bradford Culbreth, Maud Winkler Belco, Faye Rector Story, Dot Childers Stallings, Carolyn Parker Phillips, Catherine Wilson Fowler, Magdalene Arnie Peters, Mildred Chester Huntley. Third row, Fred Thompson, Gwen Riggs Fry, Elsie Jones Riggs, Edith Greer Horton, Frances Maynard Johnson, Helen Hartley Normant, Norman Caudle, Morrison Combs, Dot Winkler Ludwig, Hunt Gwynn, Donald Lackey, Harrison Winkler, Oleta May Haymaker, Margaret McGlamory Staten. Fourth row, Terrence Crump, Frank Smith Jr., Howard Miller, Arthur Caudle, David Barlow, Willard Benfield, Reese Crisp Jr., Ernest McCreary, Hal Johnson, Lehman Underdown, Charles Ed Haymaker, and Bill Parks. 1940. Class reunion is a successful event. The Lenoir High School class of 1940 held its reunion, the first in 34 years, August the 16th and 17th. The special and unforgettable celebration was enjoyed by classmates and their guests who attended the Friday and Saturday night event. The reunion was dedicated in memory of the late Phyllis Barlow Harbinson and S.F. Ludwig. Mr. and Mrs. Bill Stevens, the former Aline Broyhill, entertained the class with an informal picnic social at their home on Friday evening. Popular music of the late 1930s and early 40s, furnished by Bubba Warren, was enjoyed Saturday night by the class at a party held at the ballroom of Cedar Rock Country Club. Those attending were seated at candlelit tables arranged with bouquets of roses and summer flowers, which had been donated by several local community people. Dr. Donald Lackey presided and introduced the former teachers and officers of the class. Teachers attending as special guests were Miss Alice Robbins, Dr. James C. Harper, George Kirsten, Van Mears, Miss Sadie Adams, Mrs. John C. Adams Sowell, Mrs. Mary Stewart Ivy Hittner, Mrs. Bessie May Simpson Voss, and Miss Catherine Gaston. A message was sent by Miss Virginia Wilson of Lancaster, South Carolina, who was unable to attend. The former class officers were Hunt Gwynn Jr., President, Norman Caudle, Vice President, James Pritchett, Secretary, and Harrison Winkler, Treasurer. During the evening, members spontaneously entertained with happenings reminiscent of their school days. A number of the class members and teachers contributed bits of nostalgic memorabilia depicting the way things were for a memory table, which were on display for all to enjoy. A total of 53 gathered for the reunion, with some class members from as far away as California, South Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Alabama, New York, and Louisiana. Patsy Caroline Ainsley, Genevieve Alran, Mary Magdalene Arnie, Jack Shell Austin, Sybil Henrietta Baker, Phyllis Jean Barlow, David Horton Barlow, Lois May Barlow, Mildred Jean Barlow, Mabel Murray Beach, Willard Robert Benfield, Elizabeth Worth Bernhardt, Frances Avery Bradford, Edith Allen Brohill, Julia Alice Carlyle, Arthur McNary Caudle, Norman Bryant Caudle, Mildred Kathleen Chester, Dorothy Lorraine Childers, Nancy Beau Clure, Walter Morrison Combs, Ruth Alma Cook, Alfred Reese Crisp, Terrence Paul Crump, Harry Curtis, Jewel May Davis, Mary Lee Dicer, Eugenia Lester Falk, Edith Greer, James Glenn Griggs, Nathan Hunt Gwynn, Jr., Theodore Atkinson Hardaway, Helen Lorraine Hartley, Charles Edward Haymaker, Nancy Eloise Height, Hal Afton Johnson, Elsie Corinne Jones, Annie Lou Johnson Keller, Donald Warlick Lackey, Sire Franklin Ludwig, Margaret Dale McGlamry, Granville Ernest McCreary, Anne Oleta May, Frances Evelyn Maynard, Catherine Gray McGimpsey, Howard Hartley Miller, Fred LaRue McMillan Jr., Carolyn McDade Parker, William Ranson Parks, Sammy Bush Prestwood, James Turner Pritchett Jr., Henry Charles Query, Elizabeth Tekla Raines, Nellie Faye Rector, Gwendolyn Riggs, Ruth Marion Robbins, Edna Juanita Setzer, Selden Earl Stone Jr., Frank Lester Smith Jr., Mary Nash Smith, William Leman Underdown, Adrian LaRae Warren, Mary Ruth Warren, Catherine Stein Wilson, Dorothy Caroline Winkler, Robert Harrison Winkler, Maud Vernon Winkler, and Norma Elizabeth Wright. The LHS class of 1940 are: front row, Elizabeth Barnhart Good, Peggy Riggs Wilson, mascot, Gwen Riggs Fry, Mary Ruth Warren Mundy, Mabel Beach Rabb, Ted Hardaway, Glenn Griggs, Julia Carlisle Campbell, Frances Bradford Culbreth, Techna Raines Kelly, second row, or Elsie Jones Riggs, Chauncey Keller Puckett, Sybil Baker Sudrath, Helen Hartley Normant, Oleta May Haymaker, Marion Robbins Austin, Jewel Davis McCreary, Shirley Rabinowitz Margolis, Nancy Beau Clure Shale, Mary Hamilton Stevens, French teacher, Catherine Wilson Fowler, Dorothy Childers Stallings, and third row are Fred Thompson, Harrison Winkler, Guy Hall, Selden Stone, Norman Caudle, Margaret McGlamry Staton, Faye Rector Story, Mildred Chester Huntley, Juanita Setzer Wooten, Helene Brohill Stevens, and fourth row are Donald Lackey, Hal Johnson, Howard Miller, Reese Crisp, David Barlow, Arthur Caudle, Bill Parks, Harry Curtis, Maud Winkler Belco, Catherine McGimpsey Wilson, Hunt Gwynn. Lenoir News Topic 62890. LHS class of 1940 holds class reunion. The Lenoir High School class of 1940 held a reunion on the weekend of June 8th and 9th, celebrating the 50th anniversary of their graduation. On Friday evening, Aline Brohill Stevens, a member of the class, entertained the group around the pool at the home of her mother, Mrs. J.E. Brohill. Members of the class and their guests enjoyed an informal picnic supper and renewed acquaintance with each other. The last time this class met was in 1974. For a special treat, on Saturday morning, members of the class were given a private tour of the restoration of Lenoir High School. For many of the class, it was the first time they had returned since graduation. Saturday night there was a banquet at Cedar Rock Country Club. Only one former teacher was able to attend, Mrs. Mary Hamilton Stevens of Lumberton, who taught French. Master of ceremonies for the evening was Hunt Gwynn, president of the class. The invocation was given by the Reverend Bill McLean, LHS class of 1941. After dinner, the following classmates recalled high school happenings: David Barlow, pranks, tricks, and capers; Ted Hardaway, recalling past characters and teachers; Catherine McGipsy Wilson, weekly chapel oddities; Mabel Beach Rab, proms and jitterbugs; Elizabeth Bernhardt Good, actors and singers; and Bill Parks, band adventures. A total of 45 gathered for the reunion, with class members coming from California, Arizona, Louisiana, Kentucky, Florida, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and South Carolina. Class of 1941: Mary Virginia Bates, Mary Evelyn Clausen, Mary Elizabeth Crisp, Nancy Rebecca Clay, Virginia Dare Curtis, Effie Lorraine Goodlake, Rebecca Hamby, Faye Leota Hart, Helen Coffey Hoover, Buna Christine Hickman, Mary Kathleen Hickman, Ruth Davis Houck, Martha Inez Johnson, Frances Lee Jones, Helen Orella Lackey, Margaret Laxton, Mary Edna Lutz, Nancy Jane McNeil, Elizabeth Locke McCorkle, Margie McGee, Ruby Earl McIntyre, Margaret Agnes Moser, Grace Viola Pearson, Martha Jean Phillips, Anne Virginia Presswood, Virginia Lee Penn, Evelyn Marie Saunders, Helen Pope Setzer, Betty Brown Spencer, Margaret Elizabeth Sprouse, Ruth Everline Smith, Martha Elizabeth Stevens, Laura Eileen Sudrath, Marjorie Faith Triplett, Mary Catherine Underdown, Virginia Dorothy White, 1991, Warren G. Angley, John Yates Bond, Edmund P. Brown, William Edward Cottrell, David Homer Crescent, Charles Edward Cruz, Charles Mitchell Driver, Wilfong McLeod Frazier, Earl Grady Hall, Charles Eugene Harris, William Howard Horton, James Hampton McGill, Wayne Joseph Miller Jr., Clifton Hal Moore, Lawrence Howard Penley, Charles Winford Poteet, John Cecil Scroggs, Herbert Green Smith Jr., Charles Robert Thompson, 1975, Ray Walker. Lenoir High School, Friday, April 24, 1942. Alumni fights for U.S. LHS Service Honor Roll. Fred Ainsley, James Austin, Claude Baker, Rex Beach, Stanley Beach, Ernest Benfield, Keith Blackwelder, Morris Blizzard, Edward Bradford, Earl Bradshaw, Ralph Bradshaw, Jackson Carlson, Charles Caudle, Reese Caudle, Roy Chapman, Boyce Chester, Paul Chester, Clarence Clark, Guy Hall, Harold Hall, Ted Hall, Andrew Hamby, James Harless, Earl Hart, C.P. Hatcher, Harry Hatcher, James Houck, Max H. Hayes, Frank Hicks, Nelson Hicks, Basil Hoffman, Carl Holloman, Edward Isbell, Richard Jones, Burton Johnson, Sam Johnson, Ralph Presswood, Sam Presswood, Colin Price, Ronald Pritchard, John Rabb, Robert Rabb, L.G. Rhodes, W.A. Rhodes, Gene Richards, Ned Riggs, Carl Robbins, Dallas Robbins, Dietz Rudisell, Fred Robbins, Brother Saunders, Ted Sehorn, Cecil Setzer, Eugene Setzer. To those in service of our country, this issue of the Mountaineer is loyally dedicated to Lenoir High alumni in the armed forces of the nation. It is only a small part of the things to be done in order to show them that they are not forgotten. Many of the boys left school during the last few years. The many interesting letters received from the boys from all parts of the country clearly showed that a word from home was always welcome. The purpose of this paper is to show them the changes and improvements in the town and the school. The activities of the band, drama league, football team, and other student organizations are changing constantly, and the differences of the last few years are interesting to observe. With these facts in mind, the Mountaineer is publishing this edition for the boys from Lenoir High who are doing their part for Uncle Sam. We feel certain that they remember and treasure those years they spent in Lenoir High School preparing themselves. We know that they are now putting into use the results of that preparation in all the phases of this war that they are now engaged in, fighting for their families, their America, and for their very lives. A continuation of the LHS Service Honor Roll. Paul Chester, Clarence Clark, Lawrence Clark, Frank Clifton, Jack Coffey, Jennings Coffey, David Conway, Dennis Cook, James Cook, Howard Carell, Clarence Courtney, Archie Craig, Jimmy Crawford, Banks Curtis, Bob Curtis, Harry Curtis, J.C. Curtis, Charles Driver, James Driver, George Dula, Howard Dula, Mac Dula, Ned Dula, Sidney Dula, James Farthing, A.B. Goodman Jr., Bonnie Gooseby Jr., Glenn Griggs, Dennis Hass, Sam Johnson, Columbus Kincaid, Clyde Lackey, Junior Lawson, Charles Lefevers, Howard Madison, Hal Marley, Wallace Marley, Tom Martin, John Matheson, Richard Maddox, Sturgis May, Wade McCall, L.H. McCulley, Fred McLean, Edison McCrary, Van Mears, Vance Miller, Dudley Nelson, Jack Parker, Thomas Parks, Jack Paris, Charles O. Pearson, Marshall Pearson, Clark Pennell, U.D. Pitts, C.W. Porter, Joe Powell, Stanley Powell, Harry E. Prestwood, Eugene Setzer, Judd Sherrill, Tom Shoemaker, Willard Pipes, Jack Smith, Tom Smith, Edwin Sprouse, Ed Lee Steele Jr., Willie Stemple, Bernard Story, Bill Sudrath Jr., Paul Sudrath, Garland Swanson, John Thompson, Roy Thompson, Jimmy Todd, Bill Triplett, E.S. Triplett, Jack Triplett, Ned Triplett, Davis Tuttle, Magruder Tuttle, Robert Tuttle, Charles Warren, Tom Warren, Earl Watson, Edward Watson, Frank White Jr., R.E. Wilson Jr., Robert Wilson. Many more boys from LHS will soon be listed with those now on the Service Honor Roll. The list shall keep growing larger and our spirits shall grow higher, for we take pride in knowing that our alma mater is responsible for the educational training it gave our boys, and that they are now practicing this training to outwit and outfight the enemy in their battle to make American democracy free forever. Our Boys by Dolores Roberts. Among the heroes listed now is a familiar name. The high school boys of yesterday have become the men of fame. Khaki instead of our blue and white, in place of their books or their guns, off they go to democracy's fight. Our boys are now Liberty's sons down the echoing halls of life. Boyish laughter reaches our ears over the gap of passing time, over the fast-flying years. Come the memories of their days spent in pranks and learning. Back we go to the happy times, memories are ever returning. The minute men of 1942, patriots, citizens, all. On they will live in history, they answered America's call. Help wanted, mail. Men wanted for jobs. Men must be physically fit and willing to travel, all room and board furnished. Lots of exercise and fresh air, small pay to start with room for advancement, traveling expenses paid with prospects for spring cruise and big game hunting party filled with adventure, guns and ammunition free, long time employment assured. Apply now. Army Recruiting Service, Lenoir, North Carolina. April 24th, 1942. The Mountaineer. Former LHS stars now in the U.S. military. Yesterday's stars shine again for Uncle Sam. In the past month, the 8th grade has given a paper to the alumni of the LHS who are in the services of our country. Many of these boys have fought for the honor and glory of our school in some form of sports. The purpose of this column today is to name these boys, tell you how outstanding they were, and to let them know that we still think of the days when they were students. Foremost among these is U.D. Pitts. Pitsy, as he was called, was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, sports figure to ever don an LHS uniform. He was captain and quarterback of the football team for 4 years. During this time, he was voted on the all-conference team twice. He was guard on the basketball team under McLeod and Porter. He was the star hurler for the baseball team and wielded a mighty bat at the plate. U.D. seemed at ease on the mound as he looked toward the batter's box and executed his throw. He has won the esteem of many coaches and players, and has tried in every way possible to keep his own glory out of his mind. When we dream of a truly great athlete, we will first consider U.D. Pitts, the hero of the LHS sporting age. Another great athlete and teammate of Pitts was the interesting person of Clark Pennell. Pennell was an all-around athlete. He was a catcher on the baseball squad, all-conference guard on the football team, and guard on the basketball team. Pennell is an excellent specimen of young manhood. In a football game, when the going was tough, Pennell was the man who slapped you on the back and kept up the spirit. Every opponent respected him and everyone liked him. His name will always be at the top of our list of sports stars. Brother to Clark and another great athlete is Rex Pennell. Rex took part only in football, but he was a humdinger, one of the hardest charging linemen ever to wear a LHS uniform. Rex played with the tougher team of past years. Even though he is gone from our school, we still think of him. Rex Beach is our next sports hero. Rex participated in football and gave a splendid account of himself while he played. Rex was a little lighter and smaller than the rest of the boys, but he was always in there plugging. Catcher on the baseball team and backfield performer on the football squad is none other than Ralph Bradshaw. Ralph was an excellent catcher and field coach for the baseball team. He played backfield under Coach Porter. Boyce Chester, brother to Bruce, and another excellent athlete. Boyce played football and baseball as well as did Paul Chester, his brother. Both boys gave a splendid account of themselves, and today we have their brother Bruce to carry on the family honor. Next on the list is Jinx Coffey. Jinks played football and first base on the baseball team. Jinks will always be remembered for his brilliant runs and kickoff returns. He was a hard-hitting first baseman and an excellent fielder. We are still thinking of you, Jinks. Now, fighting the Japs is James Driver, known as Dude to all those who knew him. He made all-conference center for 2 years and could really shine on defense. He was an excellent specimen of manhood. Dude was an excellent player and defensive man. Best of luck in your present job, Dude. One of the hardest hitting tackles ever played here was Sid Dula. Sid was a motorcycle riding fiend and could really bowl his opponents over on the football field. He was tackled on the 1938 Championship 11. A.B. Goodman Jr. was one of the most outstanding football players that we ever had. He had been described as an excellent back and broken field runner. Little Doc was a real All-American if we ever had one. Punk Kincaid will always be remembered when a good tackle is to be needed. Punk also was on the championship team of 1938. He was a real bone crusher and a hard charger. Another Husky lad is Jack Parker. Jack played guard on the Lenoir forward wall and could really dish out the goods. He is now in Fort Jackson and itching to get hold of a Jap. Everyone remembers our good-natured coach, Mr. C.W. Porter, now captain in our U.S. Army. He never played for LHS, but he gave us many splendid teams. He was our all-around coach and all-around guy. Hats off to C.W. Porter, our never-to-be-forgotten coach. Colin Price was a catcher on our baseball team. After he finished school, he was a catcher for several town baseball teams. He was a real player, and everyone knows it. John Rabb, now in Uncle Sam's forces, was a truly great athlete. He will never be forgotten for the excellent ways he performed for LHS. Paul Sudrath played left field on the baseball team and could really hit the apple. He was one of the leading batters in the Western Conference. Swinging from the left side of the plate, Paul was a perfect statue as he made his swing. He is now with the U.S. Marines. That is all in this series of reports on our boys now in the service of their country. This being the first of the series, it is naturally full of mistakes, and many boys have been omitted. As time goes on, they will be added and written about. The reporter would greatly appreciate all help given him in preparation of this column. Keep starring with Uncle Sam, boys. Beef Johnson. Class of 1942. Flora Nadine Baker, Mavis Viola Bolick, Marjorie Lorraine Bolt, Mary Evelyn Bumgardner, Mary Geneva Childers, Margaret Elizabeth Chester, Goldie Mae Church, Margaret Elise Clark, Ella Josephine Clure, Ruth Kathleen Correll, Shadena Crump, Martha Greer, Helen Elizabeth Harris, Dorothy Hartley, Margaret Louise Hardin, Precious Wanda Hoyle, Margaret Hoyle, Anne Revere Ingram, Chauncey May Kincaid, Yvonne Lee Lawing, Margaret Lindsay Laney, Alice Jane McGee, Frances Irene Miller, 1984, Jesse Williams Makeley, Freda Estelle Miller, Dorothy Carolyn Pennell, Emma Roberta Raines, 1973, Clara Estelle Rutledge, Donna Viola Rhodes, Artie Kathleen Triplett, Jerry Williamson, Mary Elma Winkler, Mary Helen Wood, Dorothy Elizabeth Wagner, Joseph Gwen Austin, Henry Bethune Adams, Marshall Lincoln Barlow, Joseph Babin Bernard, George Lynn Bernhardt, R.L. Bush Jr., Perry Bernard Clure, Kenneth Carrington Carpenter, Charles Augustus Carson, William Donald Childers, James Edward Grice, Ben Hood Jr., Earl Frank Hoover, William Freeman Howard Jr., Charles William Johnson Jr., Eugene Weaver Johnson, 1981, Jack Oscar Kenneth Knight, Robert Philgo Murray, Richard Edward Norman Jr., Chelsea Ned Oxentine, William Vanoy White, Bynum Edgar Weathers Jr., Louis Rodney Wisnett.